I once went hiking with this guy. He showed me a dead body. This started when I was at my childhood friend's apartment for what was supposed to be a fun little movie night. We hadn't hung out in a while, and we were catching up. Her place was cozy, a little disorganized, and full of girly decor. We were in our comfiest sweatpants, about to watch princess movies. Her apartment isn't the most tidy. Things are a bit scattered around, but it's clean and so authentic, which always made me feel at home. We decided on ordering pizza for dinner. She mentioned that Sherwood, someone I hadn't met yet, would bring over the pizza. At first, I was not happy to hear that. I thought that meant she had invited other friends, a boy, over to join us, which wasn't what I had in mind, but I was in for a surprise. Sherwood turned out just to be our delivery guy for the night. When he got to the apartment, there was this awkward air about him. He was obviously nervous, fumbling a bit with the pizza boxes, and not quite making eye contact. My friend introduced us quickly, and it was clear from her overly thankful demeanor that Sherwood did a lot more than just fetch dinner. After handing us the pizza, there was this brief moment of forced small talk. My friend was super nice to him, despite his awkwardness. He wasn't the best conversationalist and seemed really out of place. Then Sherwood asked for my number. I was in a tough spot because our mutual friend was sitting right there, so I just gave it to him. Yeah, we chatted for maybe 5 minutes before my friend gave him a cue to leave, with something like, "Thanks so much for dropping this off." He seemed to get the hint. We both gave him a hug, before my friend said something like, "Drive safe," giving him another kind of cue to leave. When I asked my friend what that was all about, she basically explained that Sherwood was her unpaid personal assistant. He did her grocery shopping, he dropped off pizza, and he did all this other stuff. I think Sherwood was just a really lonely guy, desperate for interaction, especially female interaction. My friend and I were both young and immature back then. We were about 23, but I think we both knew something was seriously wrong with Sherwood. It was a little hard to articulate because we couldn't point out exactly what his problem was. Sherwood started a group chat with my friend and me. He just sent a meme or two every week. It felt like he was trying to stay relevant without being intrusive. Maybe he was used to being sidelined or even blocked by other girls in the past. It felt like he was trying to make me remember him, but also carefully trying not to give me a reason to block him too. I can't speak on his behalf, that's just what it felt like. Sherwood also offered help with errands. The first time I said, "Thanks for asking, but no." He asked every weekend after that. One day, I made the mistake of accepting his help. I knew better. I'd recently found a great deal for a new washing machine on Craigslist, but I had no idea how to pick it up and install it. When I mentioned it in the chat, Sherwood excitedly volunteered to take care of the whole thing. He handled the whole pickup and installation like a total champ, which saved me so much hassle. I tried to pay him for his efforts because I wanted to show appreciation, but he wouldn't accept any money. I insisted. Eventually, he suggested that I could repay him by joining him for a hike. Like what? I was uneasy about this. It felt a bit too personal, and I almost felt like it could be mistaken for a date. But Sherwood framed it as nothing more than a friendly outing, like a transaction, to balance out the favor. I agreed to the hike. I rationalized it by telling myself it was a fair trade for installing the washing machine, and that it was genuinely a form of payment, especially since I didn't think he had too many friends. This hike felt like maybe a way for him to have some companionship. I thought it might be nice helping him. Part of me was still uneasy about spending time with him in such an isolated setting. The day of the hike, Sherwood picked this trail that was nearby. I had been there before. It's gorgeous. As we walked along together, he chatted about ordinary things, like work, the weather, and his hobbies. Everything seemed normal, until he suggested we go off the main path to see something special he wanted to share. Like, what could that even mean? We reached this secluded spot, and there, oh my gosh, was a dead body. My heart pounded so violently as Sherwood stood there, so eerily calm and nonchalant. The casualness in his demeanor made me feel even more uneasy. It felt like he wasn't just showing me a dead body, but also revealing this darker side of himself. It smelled bad, but not like in the movies. I didn't know how long it had been there. I'm not a biologist, but my guess is that it had smelled a lot worse before, but now it had gone down. At that moment, I mumbled some excuse about needing to get back quickly and started walking briskly towards the main path. I was urging Sherwood to follow me. I thought maybe this was some twisted mind game, like a way to intimidate me or show me that he wasn't just some harmless little boy. Maybe he was trying to send a message that said, "You should know I'm familiar with things like this." Oh, there's another possibility. Maybe he just wanted me to think about him more. Sometimes when I talk to people, I feel like they only notice me for that time that we're together, and they won't think of me again until the next time we meet. It's possible Sherwood felt that way about me, and maybe he thought showing me a dead body would make him less forgettable. I have no idea. But on the surface, he seemed oblivious to how inappropriate this was. As we walked back together, I was in full flight or fight mode, instinctively looking around to see if there were other hikers or rangers, anyone who could make me feel like I wasn't alone. The moment I spotted someone else on the trail, I called out, not to expose Sherwood, but just asking for directions back to the parking area. I wanted to make sure Sherwood and I would not be left alone together. I asked this gentleman to walk us back to the parking lot. I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I kept pretending like I was confused about his directions, and eventually he agreed to just walk us there. Getting help from that guy was my way of re-anchoring myself to safety and normality while I was still under the shock of what Sherwood had shown me. We got to the parking area. There I called my friend and told her I was with Sherwood. I suggested he could drop me off with her and that we would be there in 20 minutes. Sherwood agreed. That was my way of making sure that if anything happened, it was on record that Sherwood was the last person to have been with me. Also, I immediately texted my friend what had happened to get that on record too. When I got to her apartment, we said thanks to Sherwood and kindly told him to go away. I had already told her through text, but then I started going into all the detail. The fact that the body had insects, the fact that the face was decomposing but still recognizable, etc. Her reaction was pure horror, not just about the dead body, but also how nonchalantly Sherwood had treated the whole situation. She confessed she always sensed something was off about him, even though she'd never imagined anything this disturbing. We both agreed that we needed to remove Sherwood from our lives. She admitted that she felt stuck and she had become too reliant on Sherwood just to fire him cold turkey. We planned out how we would do it. It was this gradual phasing out plan. We would limit our interactions to times when others were present. We would slowly reduce our responses to his texts. I would never ask for his help again, and my friend would ask for less and less help. Sherwood kept texting during weekends, offering to run errands or asking if we needed anything, to which my friend would reply, "I'm trying to work on being more independent, but you've really been such a big help." Eventually, as my friend started dating someone new, she introduced Sherwood to her boyfriend. Sherwood never contacted her after that. I had called the cops the same night of the incident, but it was a while before we heard more news about it, at least a full month later. A news report confirming discovering a dead body in that area where Sherwood had taken me hiking. They made an arrest, not of Sherwood, but of this other guy that Sherwood followed on Instagram. I have no idea if Sherwood was connected to the murder. Reflecting on everything, I think there's one clear moral of the story: trust your instincts. My girlfriend and I went for a night hike. A few months back, my girlfriend and I were bored hanging around the house and spontaneously decided to go out for a hike. We don't go hiking often, but the idea appealed to both of us, and even though there was only about an hour left of light, we figured we had enough time to go enjoy a hike before it got too dark. We quickly fill up our water bottles and put on the best walking shoes we had, and we were out the door, driving up into the mountains. Around my area, there are many hiking trails, with the variety of trails increasing as you go up into the mountains. We tended to stay around the base of the mountains in the occasional case of us hiking, where most people would still be walking, but we wanted to change things up and progressed further up the mountain road to a trail a friend of mine had mentioned. We kept in mind our time and figured that we could hike for a bit and simply enjoy the new environment for us and finish up before it was too late. We arrived at the trailhead and see that there were no cars left along the road where the trail commences, but didn't think much of it due to the time. We still had a good 45 minutes until dark, so we continued on. We start walking down a fairly steep hill that then recoups the elevation at the bottom with an equally steep hill that you have to ascend. We reach the top, and then it's smooth sailing from there. We see a lone coyote off of the trail a ways off, and some rabbits, and I made a quip about how those rabbits might need to be careful with that coyote lurking around. She playfully hit me for that one. Approximately less than a mile into the trail, we see a large fallen tree that made a bridge over a dried riverbed, and decided to take a rest, climb around on it, and take pictures. We're there for about 10 minutes, and then resume hiking. We continue on the trail for a short distance, until she hears a rustle in the trees behind us. We stop, mildly spooked due to the assumed size of whatever made that rustling, but continue on only briefly, before she decides she's done and that we need to head back. It's twilight now, so I agree with her, and we turn around to head back to the car. When we made it back to the fallen tree, my shoe had come untied, so I used the trunk to fix my loose laces, and look behind us for the first time on the hike. Uncharacteristic for me, but hey, I was having fun. Why be paranoid? I see a person dressed entirely in black, with their hood on that was a significant distance behind us, walking at a slow, even pace. It wasn't something out of the ordinary. So what if they're wearing black with their hood on? I wear black most of the time and it's cold out. I shouldn't make assumptions. This does trigger me to be more alert, however, and I inform my girlfriend of this person's presence. It's now dusk. We continue on at an intentionally faster pace and go through a winding section of the trail, and I lose sight of the person. When we come around the final bend of the section, I figure they're far behind us and that there's nothing to worry about. Sooner rather than later, the person is behind us again, but much closer, probably 50 feet in comparison to 100 feet before, and we had increased our speed, so this alarmed us. We briskly walk around another bend, and as soon as we come around it, we book it. It seemed to be a natural reaction on both of our parts, as we just started running without a word to initiate it. We are nearing the trailhead now, with only the hills to deal with. We catch our breaths for a moment, and I turn around again. I see the person seemingly halt a sprint upon noticing me looking back, as if they were trying to uphold the illusion of simply walking. At this point I shout, "Go!" and we sprint down the hill. What little light was left struggled to make its way through the dense trees surrounding us, and the steep hill proved to be challenging to run down, without a clear path to be seen. We both stumbled down the hill, almost falling multiple times, slamming our feet onto the rocks and loose brush. But we didn't fall, and we didn't look behind us. We make it to the bottom, but must continue up the initial hill, and then we will have made it out. We persevere up the incline and make it back to our car. I briefly breathe in relief as I start my car, heart pounding and adrenaline racing. As I reverse onto the road, the person emerges at the trail head, apparently breathing heavy. We finally get a glimpse of him. His hood had fallen off his head, exposing his pale complexion and dead eyes that were only illuminated by a single lantern at the start of the trail. He was holding something in his hand, but it was too dark to see, and I was not interested in sticking around to make out the object. I shift into drive and accelerate as fast as my car could muster, leaving him behind in the dust of the empty side of the road. Night trail stalker dude, let's not meet. The day I was almost murdered while hiking on the Natchez Trace. So this is kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, while still including all of the relevant info I can still remember. I was 15 at the time. I live in the south, in a small town that was built along the Natchez Trace. For anyone who doesn't know, the Natchez Trace is a very long stretch of road that runs almost the entire length of the United States, north to south. It was used by tribes way back when to quickly get around the country for trade, and during the Civil War it was used by both Union and Confederate soldiers for travel. It is federally protected land now, and feels very isolated. No one is allowed to build anything within about a mile of the trace, and there are no streetlights, just a 2-lane road. There are burial mounds, even unnamed Civil War graves, and lots of offshoot hiking trails. It is extremely illegal to dig up anything, etc. In my town, it isn't uncommon to go hiking out there, because it's absolutely gorgeous, but there were stories about being careful. I remember in the 90s, a young woman was killed out there while hiking, and there were all these sort of boogeyman stories about not being out on the trace after dark. Hiking the trace was something that me and some friends used to do a lot when we were young. We used to go off trail often, because you can find some really cool stuff back there. One day me and a buddy were out there going through some trails and checking stuff out like we always did. It was in the spring and not quite summer yet, but the days were starting to get longer. It wasn't super late, but later than we were usually out, just barely dusk. We were about an hour or two into hiking and had gone off trail like usual. We come up on this break in the trees that opened up in this big open field. and there's an old truck out there. That alone was a huge red flag, because you can't use any vehicles off-road there. But there were two dudes next to the truck with shovels, and enough dirt next to them that you could tell they'd been digging a pretty big hole for a while. The bed of the truck was open, but we couldn't see inside it from where we were. They looked up at us, and there was like this weird second or two where no one said anything. And I don't remember who moved first, but I remember the dudes both jumping into the truck, starting it up, and driving full speed towards us. We ran back into the trees in a panic, because we thought for sure they were going to run us down. I remember hearing the truck stop at the trees behind us as we ran, and hearing them get out yelling. We ran for what felt like a solid couple minutes before we jumped into a deadfall of broken trees and just stayed as quiet as we could. We could hear them a ways off, and we could hear dogs barking as well, like they had dogs with them. And I specifically remember hearing one of them yell at some point, "I can't see you, but I can hear you, and my dog's gonna get you." We just stayed quiet and didn't move, because we never heard them get close enough that we thought they'd spot us. Eventually, we heard the truck start again in the distance and stayed out until we couldn't hear it anymore, and then we carefully walked back to the car without saying a word. I remember the whole ride home, we were quiet, and every pair of headlights we saw made me almost have a heart attack, because I thought it would be them looking for us. I never found out what they were doing out there, but it must have been something bad. When I was younger, my brain always went to the obvious cliche, like someone hiding a body, mostly because it would be a good spot to do it. No one looks for stuff out there. But as I got older, I began to think it was probably either dirty money or drug stashes. The town is also small enough that I've always wondered if I ever ran into these people again out in public and just not known it, getting groceries or running errands. How many times I've been a car or two behind them at a stoplight. To this day, it gives me the willies.